As dumb as zombies are, they pose a significant philosophical problem. Zombies are deceased human beings, except that reanimation thing and the drive to attack and eat the living. They have, let's call it, a spark. What do we make of this? What is that spark? It's not much, just enough to get them going and sent off somewhere. But it's the thing that distinguishes a zombie from a corpse. So it's hugely significant. What the spark is and where it comes from has some big philosophical implications. And this leads to other big questions about ourselves. Like us, zombies are physical, material entities. And just like zombies, we too have a spark. But what a spark! We can do this, and this, and this, and we can make this, and this. So the same question, it's just that zombies ask it more simply, more directly. As I have argued before, the zombie itself is a question that is part of a larger conversation on the subject of human identity. Basically, what is a human being? Zombies are popular in our culture because in the context of modern secularism, their qualities and characteristics resonate with us, as do the questions that they're asking. One of these questions is about consciousness and subjectivity. And the zombie spark, where do these things come from? In our world today, we are strongly inclined to say that they are to be found in the material that we are made of. Physicalists or materialists believe that everything is physical, and only physical, or material. So everything about us has to have a physical or material explanation. Consciousness and subjectivity are parts of the brain. So to find out about consciousness and subjectivity, a physicalist would say that we need to study the organ that zombies eat. Neuroscience is one branch of this investigation. Researchers use various brain imaging techniques and experimental methods to identify which neural patterns correspond to different conscious states or contents. They are looking at when people are aware of visual stimulus and emotional stimulus. They're looking to the frontal parietal network, attention systems, and something called the global workspace. Not everyone is a fan of the neuroscientific approach. They say it doesn't really bridge the explanatory gap between the objective neural process and the subjective experience. And it doesn't address the hard problem of why we have conscious experiences at all. The zombie has a simpler critique of this neuroscientific approach. They have terrible vision, no emotion, no functioning prefrontal cortex or parietal lobe. As a matter of fact, when you do a brain scan, and we saw this in episode 6 of season 1 of The Walking Dead, everything is black, except for a faint glow in the brainstem. It's insidious, and it's faint, but it's just enough to animate the body. All the proposed sources of the zombie spark are external to the brain. Viruses or pathogens or parasites, magical or supernatural forces, alien influences, or scientific experiments gone wrong. The point is that the physicalists insist that the source of human consciousness and subjectivity, and the zombie spark by extension, must come from within the brain itself. But every zombie narrative presents the cause of the zombie infestation and that insidious glow in the brainstem as being external to the brain. There are other physicalist approaches, like the computational theories, for instance, but I don't believe that they are ever going to find the source of consciousness in matter itself. And the zombies don't think so either. Have you heard about philosophical zombies? I've made a video about them. It's serious philosophical stuff. The link is in the description. Anyway, in the conversation about what it means to be human, there are significant voices that say physicalism is wrong, that there is an external, non-material source of consciousness and subjectivity. But before we get into those, let's look at an explanation that tries to bridge the gap between the purely physical explanations of consciousness and those that invoke non-physical elements. It's called emergentism. Emergentism suggests that consciousness arises as some new, unique property from the complex interactions of physical components within the brain. Let's use a metaphor to explain this. Think of emergentism as the formation of a city. A city is made up of many individual components: buildings, roads, people, vehicles, utilities, and so on. These are like the basic physical elements in a system, like neurons in the brain. When these physical components are arranged in certain ways and interact with each other according to various rules, like zoning laws, social norms, economic principles, etc., something entirely new emerges. a living, breathing city with its own unique character and dynamics. The city as a whole has properties that can't be predicted or fully explained by looking at its individual physical parts. Some of these properties might include culture, economy, traffic patterns, and different kinds of neighborhoods, each with their own unique identities. This emergent city, with all its particular properties, represents consciousness. So an emergentist would argue that you won't find consciousness if you just study the parts of the brain. It's a new thing that arises as a novel property from the complex interactions in the brain. And as with human consciousness, so with the zombie spark. Bingo. And the zombies might again be suggesting a critique. The only reason a post-zombie apocalyptic city retains some elements of an emergent city is because actual human beings are still active as they try to survive. So perhaps a city, any city, post-apocalyptic or not, is emergent only because human beings, most of whom have consciousness, live there. I realize that this is mostly critiquing the analogy and not necessarily the theory, but I think it works as a critique of emergentism. When you find something that appears to have a higher non-material reality, how can you say it arises from matter and not from something that transcends matter? Anyway, let's move on. One of the reasons that zombies are so popular, and even that they exist at all, is because the zombie is representative of our suppressed questions about our identity. Their existence doesn't prove that physicalism is wrong, but their presence and popularity suggest we are very uncomfortable with physicalist explanations of our identity. So let's now turn to non-physicalist explanations for human consciousness and subjectivity, and the spark that animates zombies. Dualism is a word we need to bring up here. You probably heard about René Descartes. He's the one who said, "I think, therefore I am." It's a significant statement. It puts forth the idea that mental operations, like consciousness and subjectivity, are fundamentally different from physical properties. But long before Descartes came up with what we call Cartesian dualism, everyone knew this. The vast majority of human beings who have ever lived experience their lives as unique conscious subjects. And I realize that what we're talking about isn't a majority rules kind of thing, but this is the mechanism that has given rise to zombies, and that's the subject of this video. The point is that zombies are a thing because we as a society have apparently some significant doubts about the idea that we are just material beings. It's not consistent with our experience. Throughout human history, people have thought that we have something within us that linked us to the transcendent and maybe even to the divine. And we can't escape the idea that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality, and that we are actually an individual subject. And zombies are an embodiment of our doubts that we matter, or don't matter. That's right. And if the physicalists were right, we would be a lot more like zombies than we are. That's what the zombies are suggesting. Although we've touched on some heavy philosophical stuff here, we've done none of them justice. But what we have done is we've talked about zombies, and maybe asked some interesting questions about them and about ourselves. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.